Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily guide to decoding current affairs the smart way for UPSC. It's March 18th, 2026 and today's edition brings two important analysis articles for your mains examination. First, the Supreme Court's observations on maternity leave. We will be examining issues of broader gender justice, labor rights and workplace welfare in India's evolving policy framework. Second, we will have a look into the scientific collaborations within the BRICS framework, understanding how emerging countries are strengthening cooperation in research, innovation and strategic technologies. Finally, we will be wrapping up the discussion with prelims pointers, which are highly crucial for your upcoming prelims 2026 examination. So let's begin. The Supreme Court of India has finally recognized the rights of adoptive mothers when it comes to their maternity leave. And this is exactly what we are going to examine in this article, because from the perspective of prelims, GS1 and GS2, we have to understand the role of women in our society and also the various issues faced by them. Also, we have to look into the various welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population, and this is exactly where the recent landmark Supreme Court judgment is coming into the picture, because it has expanded the reproductive and the workplace rights of working women. Mainly here we are talking about adoptive mothers. So let us look at this article from a very broader perspective when we talk about the legal background. Now it has to be also noted, in a very progressive way, the Supreme Court has also prodded and encouraged the central government to frame a similar act on paternity benefits. So let us firstly understand what is the legal background of maternity benefits in the country. Now you know guys that there are 4 labor codes as of now. These are progressive labor codes which give expansive amount of labor rights to majority of the working population in the country. And one of them is Code on Social Security. Code on Social Security is actually having right now, as of now, the provisions of the Maternity Benefit Act. It was actually enacted in 1961, way after independence, because back then these issues of maternity benefits and all those things were not existent in those parts of Indian society. Right now we know that after several decades, after several movements by women and also various activists, we have come to recognize the maternity benefits that the women should be accorded at their workplaces, because a simple act of motherhood, or actually getting a child, was not seen in a very positive lens by employers. So the central government over a period of time had to negotiate with the employers, had to come up with a national legislation known as the Maternity Benefit Act. Now in this Maternity Benefit Act, any woman who is actually planning to bear first to surviving child, they should get around 26 weeks of maternity leave. So in that kind of leave, just a few months before childbirth and some months after childbirth, the woman should not be forced to come to office, right, or have no other work related to office. That particular woman should be given complete leave so that the woman should be able to focus on childbirth, on child care. And this is where you know that the early years of any children is actually very crucial to their mental growth, to their emotional growth and everything. And that is exactly where this kind of provisions were given. And right now we have the provisions under the Social Security Code. Also, if you can see, the Maternity Benefit Act and the Social Security Codes and the provisions of the same are kind of similar. So I am actually talking about the Code on Social Security as of now. Now you know that any biological mothers are entitled right now to get 26 weeks of paid maternity leave. So full salary must be given to those women, right? And also before childbirth, around 8 weeks of leave should be given to that woman, right? And also when we talk about the women who already have around 2 children, they will be getting reduced benefit of 12 weeks. Also, there is a very controversial section 60 in this Code on Social Security, which tells that mothers who are adopting and also mothers who are being surrogate for other couples, they should be getting only 12 weeks. And that is where if the child is below 3 months. So you mean that, for example, a mother who is biological and another mother who is adopting, still, we are talking about a small child below say 3 months. Or, we can also talk about a child who is just born, right? So that means that a mother would require equal care to those children, right? So this is exactly where the Supreme Court talked about in this particular matter. Now apart from this, we have various other benefits too. Firstly, look at the benefits, then we will be looking into the case. Under section 64, women can get 3,500 as various amounts of pre and postnatal care. Right, there are so many vulnerable sections of the population from various other lower strata of the society. Women from those strata can actually get benefit in terms of some monetary compensation by the government if the employer is not providing those compensation. Also, section 66 is telling that in a day, that particular woman at her workspace should be getting nursing breaks twice a day, right? And this should be until a child is around 15 months. Also, finally, establishments or offices with more than 50 plus employees should also have a creche where the woman can actually have the child of hers at the creche while still working in the same place. So these are actually all the amount of benefits that legally women in India are entitled to get. Now guys, imagine that there are two particular women. One is Priya and one is Pooja. Now imagine the life of Priya. Now Priya is actually planning to deliver a child, right, biologically. Pooja, on the other hand, maybe due to various medical reasons is unable to do the same. So what she does? She goes to some adoption agency. She actually files some application and she is required to wait for several months till her application is registered, some particular surrogate is actually identified, and finally she gets an adopted child. So this means that Pooja is actually going through a lot of processes, applications, and finally say after 3 months or 4 months, maybe 1 year or 2 years of waiting for adoption, she finally gets a child. And you have to understand, in both cases, Priya and Pooja, both are mothers, both are taking care of children who are around 1 month or 2 month or 3 month old. That means both are actually having the same responsibilities. Now, according to section 60 subclause 4, why are we differentiating between Priya, who is a biological mother, and Pooja, who is actually an adopting mother? This is actually grossly unequal. And also, according to the constitution of our country, according to the Supreme Court in this recent case, this is unconstitutional. Why? Because we have Article 14 in the constitution, which gives us, the right to equality. The right to equality tells that there should not be any kind of discrimination, right? So why we are discriminating between Priya and Pooja here, right? That is why the Supreme Court actually told that there is no rational reason for this thing. There is no logical explanation for this 12 weeks that Pooja would be getting as maternity leave versus the 26 weeks that Priya would be getting. So that is why Supreme Court has granted this 12-week maternity leave to all amount of adoptive mothers, right? And this is what we have to understand, that the Supreme Court has removed this 3-month amount of age cap. Also, more progressively, Supreme Court has included this right under Article 21. So Article 21 right now would be having adoption as a reproductive autonomy, and this is a fundamental right to all of the women in the country. Supreme Court also used the DPSP, the Directive Principles of State Policy, to justify this particular landmark judgment. Article 42 tells directly that maternity benefit is not a charity but a constitutional obligation. And these are actually all the arguments that you can give for this particular case, because guys, in GS1 they love to ask questions regarding the recent ongoing debates on women issues, on women empowerment, and mainly on women's reproductive health and women reproductive rights. And this is exactly why you have to understand the Supreme Court has upheld the reproductive autonomy of women, that the right to adopt is actually a fundamental right under Article 21, and if we are discriminating in this particular case like this between biological mothers and adoptive mothers, it goes against Article 14 also, that is the right to equality. So these are actually the very strong cases of accusations which were brought by H. Nanduri, and this is why this case is known as H. Nanduri versus Union of India, which you should also mention in your answers, which is where the age cap has been removed. Now, also simultaneously, the Supreme Court has brought up a very important debate. Now firstly, let us look at a very important data. What it tells? It tells that 85% of Indians believe that fathers have equal role in taking care of newborn child. Now, there are various logical 50% of our Indian population who believes that fathers do not have any responsibility while we are trying to bring up a child in the family. This is totally stupid. Supreme Court also agrees that 85% of Indians are right. And that is why we need a central legislation. The Supreme Court has told the central government, not the state governments, it has told the central government that we have to recognize paternity leave right now. Because mothers, they cannot bring up a child alone while also working, while also taking care of the family. So this particular practice will actually relieve the woman of a sole responsibility of taking care of a child. Now when we talk about the various policies in the country, only the central government employees, they have around 15 days of this paternity leave. Also when we talk about the state government, some state government have, but there are no uniform policies nationally. Also the private sector is actually filled with some very few examples such as Zomato or some very big MNCs in the country who only gives around 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks of paternity leaves only. And finally, guess who are not at all included for paternity leave? It is mainly the informal sector, the unorganized sector, who actually consist around 90% of the Indian workforce right now, because most of them do not have social security benefits, leave alone paternity benefits. Now in this particular topic, there is a particular Lok Sabha bill which was brought by Supriya Sule, right, who is a member of the parliament, but this bill is not yet passed into an act. And that is what the Supreme Court is telling, that if we do not give paternity benefits to the male particular members of the family, that means we are entrenching patriarchy in this particular child rearing framework in the country. That means that if women are only left with maternity leave, right, for around 26 weeks, now the husband is not there to support her. So she will be bringing all of the responsibility alone itself. And that is why in India, this particular perception of caregiving seen as a woman work must be dismantled. The Supreme Court told that this particular mindset, this patriarchal mindset must be dismantled at the earliest. Also, if we are actually denying the fathers who are willingly to go on paternity leaves and take care of their children, we are actually not giving those fathers opportunity to bond with their children. And this actually maybe will be creating some emotional gap going forward in the family. Now India is a country who is actually aspiring to become a developed country by 2047. But let us look at those countries right now in 2026 who has this kind of legislation itself. Firstly, when we talk about Iceland, the case is equal for both male and women. If women are getting 6 months, male are also getting 6 months. Also, they are getting 80% of the salary. They are only getting 20% salary cut, and this makes sense, right? Also, when we talk about Sweden, it is completely gender neutral. That means 480 days the couple will be getting, which will be shared as parental leave. So you can actually tell 240 days, right, for both male and female workers. Also, when we talk about UK, in UK, the maternity leave is for 52 weeks, the paternity leave is for only 14 days, which is not a very good sign. Also in US, the same case is there with our states, right? There is not a particular uniform national mandate, but definitely the various particular federal governments in the US, they have various amount of paternity and maternity leaves. Also, a very important ILO convention which has been signed by more than 20 plus countries, that is the convention number 183. It tells that at least 14 weeks of paid maternity leave should be given at 2/3 of previous salaries, and this particular benefit can be given through social protection such as various amount of deductions from salaries and so on. So in this particular aspect, you have to also understand that such ILO conventions and their numbers, if they are in the news, are very important for prelims too. And let us right now understand what should be the way forward. Now, firstly, we need a gender neutral perspective such as Sweden in India. We can have some amount of maternity benefit and paternity benefit, and we can try to club the total number of days and share between the husband and the wife. Also, We cannot strictly enforce maybe private sector compliance as of now when it comes to paternity leaves, but we have to actually talk with the private sectors. We have to actually hold some meetings and conferences with them, and gradually we have to enforce them. And there are so many companies, if you can see Zomato, if you can see Starbucks, TCS, they are all actually talking about paternity leave right now. Now when we talk also about single fathers and single mothers, we have to make the various provisions for them much more safe and secure, because we have to understand that all of them are citizens of the country. They are entitled to their fundamental rights. And also when we talk about the directive principles of state policies, article number 39, 41, 42, 43, they all directly and indirectly talks about maternity leave and paternity leave. We actually have to understand that if we are talking about the future workforce of our population, they are the small children right now who will be growing up to be productive tomorrow. And that is why we need their mothers and their fathers to be present at this stage of their life. Also, there is a growing trend of singlehood right now. There are also various trends of single marriages right in the country. You can let me know what is the recent case we have seen in the comments below. So that is why we can give more amount of these rights to the single fathers and the single mothers. Also, when we talk about our informal workforce, what about them? How we can enforce a particular legislation for them? And that is why we know we have the code on social security as of now. We also need to include the male fathers in the particular list for amount of paternity benefits. Also, the draft rules of 2025 December, when it comes to the gig workers, they're proposing that the workers in the gig economy who have served around say 120 days or say around 3-4 months on those particular platforms, they can actually get some of the benefits of maternity leave. But we are not yet aware of what are the exact amount of provisions which the government actually want these companies to implement. Also, at the end of the day, we have to include mental health as a part of this particular legislation. We have to include mental health to be much more elaborative in this particular case, because when we talk about pregnancy, when we talk about delivery, when we talk about the post-delivery and the taking care of the child for around 1 year, 2 years, we have to understand the parents go through a lot of ordeal. So teleconsultations, e-medicines, proper amount of mental health care supporter, all of those things must be also involved in this particular maternity benefits under the social security code, and also a future legislation on paternity benefits. So actually when we talk about the 2025 bill on paternity benefits, we also should be trying to pass this bill into an act, and we have to actually lead to a progressive and a modern workplace in India as of now. So with reference to discussion right now and this particular landmark case, you try to write these main answers. Now let us move on to the next one. India is about to host the 2026 edition of the BRICS Summit. Now in this article, we are not going to talk about the details of BRICS because we will be covering them in the coming few discussions. What we are going to talk about is the main theme of this article, which is also very important, and maybe right now UPSC is moving away from generic questions to more agenda based questions regarding international organizations and groupings. Now when we talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, UPSC has time and again questioned regarding the security and the various related aspirations of the SCO to combat terrorism. So let us actually talk about how BRICS and science and technology ecosystem is related. Now you know guys that the recent 2026 BRICS Summit, which is going to take place in India, the main theme of the same is resilience, innovation, cooperation and sustainability. And that is exactly why we are talking about the second pillar of our theme. And mind you guys, the themes in recent times in UPSC prelims have become very important, because in 2024 and also in 2025 prelims, they are right now focusing on different types of questions on international institutions. They are asking on themes, they are asking on what are the various names of agreements, they are asking on where the particular summit is held, and also they are asking about the various amounts of sub-agreements of the various summits. So let us actually talk on one very important matter that will dominate this 2026 BRICS Summit. So when we talk about the BRICS 2026 summit as of now, let us actually talk about briefly what the members of BRICS initially. Firstly, we know that the inner circle of the BRICS is actually Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, who actually founded, kind of the BRICS here. Now, the main founders were Brazil, Russia, India and China. South Africa happened to be included later on. Also, when we talk about the expanded membership of the BRICS in 2024, we have had new members in Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and UAE. There were also talks of Saudi Arabia joining in officially, but Saudi Arabia has still been hesitant to be a full-time member of this particular organization. Now, because the Saudi Arabia is also very close partner with the US and the Western groups here, and that is why there are so many amount of pressures on the country to be a part of the BRICS or not. Also, in 2025, Indonesia formally joined the BRICS too. Also, in the same terms, the BRICS membership was expanded to include Argentina too, but it declined to be more close with the US and Israeli policies. Now, when we have talked about the membership here, which are very important for your prelims, right now let us move on to the main topic. Why BRICS and science and technological innovation is very important for 21st century. Mainly in the age of techno-nationalism, where the countries right now are coming up with new technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain technology. Also, there are various other countries who are focused on critical minerals. So, countries right now are taking advantage of their own advantage in technology. For example, US would not want the rise of China in AI, right? And that is why US over a period of time have had so many export controls. For example, reducing the number of NVIDIA's graphics cards or graphical processing units to China. And China has been facing this export ban of semiconductors since the time of Joe Biden. So, US is very jealous of China getting ahead in the AI race. So, that is why we are in the age of techno-nationalism, where the national policies regarding technologies are right now determined by jealousy, selfishness and mainly in national interests. Also, when we talk about the various sanctions which the Trump administration loves to impose. Also, let us talk about the sanctions which the Donald Trump administration loves to impose on everyone. Firstly, they imposed restrictions on their own US universities, and due to which even various popular universities such as Harvard, MIT, they protested against the Trump administration's sanctions and tariffs and the funding cut to such universities. And this means that the US government is cutting off the scientific access to crucial technologies if at all the US government suspects that those universities or those researchers or those research groups and firms, they are using the technology to give the technology to some other countries. So, what the US government, and not only the US government here, we are also talking about the European Union, what they are trying to do is they are trying to keep the technology with themselves. And in this, we are trying to get a theme that mainly the developed countries, the Western countries, they want and try to keep the technologies with them so that the developing countries such as India and China do not get their hands on the same. Also, at the end of the day, we hear of Apple, we hear of Microsoft, we hear of so many other companies migrating away from countries such as China who are hostile. They are migrating to their friends. For example, Apple is coming to India. Also, most importantly, what Apple right now is doing over a period of time, say around 10 to 15 years from now, they are hoping to shift their entire silicon manufacturing, iPhone manufacturing to US and to places near the US. And also sometimes in India also, because India is an US ally. Now, what we are trying to observe in these three phenomena is that the developed countries are trying to have more control over these new age technologies, and that is why BRICS, which is actually a very important initiative and a grouping of like-minded developing countries, is trying to break. Now, the main architecture of the BRICS Science and Technological Innovation Cooperation can be found in so many initiatives of the BRICS. Firstly, we have the STIEP working group, where we have various amount of research plans, we have a collaborative action plan on the research and development that should be taking place between the 10 BRICS members. Also, when we talk about the BRICS Technological Transfer Center, which is perhaps one of the most important centers which is trying to promote STI cooperation within the BRICS itself, it is trying to take various technologies which the various members of the BRICS develop between themselves, and then this particular technology transfer center, the TTC, they try to commercialize it. They try to bring in various private sector and try to actually understand how that particular science and research can be made at a commercial level, so that the researchers, the universities, and at the end of the day the countries, they actually earn something out of the same. And at the end of the day, we have to understand, the more amount of technological commercialization we have in a country, the more amount of economic manpower and the resources, and at the end of the day the tax revenues that particular country would be having. Also, we have the BRICS Institute of Future Networks, which is focused on information, communication and technology, mainly in the age of 5G and 6G technologies, and also the age of AI, which depends on high performance computing. We also will be covering a very important article on data centers on AI, where we will be understanding what amount of incentives and funding we actually need to realize the dream of even one AI data center in the country. So that is exactly why the BRICS Institute of Future Networks will be focusing on. Next, we have the New Development Bank, which is, we can tell that it is kind of the World Bank of the BRICS. You know that the World Bank gives various developmental finances and the loans to various low developing countries and the poorer nations in the country, and also to the developing economies in the entire world. The New Development Bank is also trying to do the same. Now here, the New Development Bank is trying to finance various infrastructural projects when it comes to information communication technology. Also, the China BRICS Research Center on New Quality Productive Forces recently was inaugurated at Beijing, and it is trying to focus on university to university ties and exchange of information and technological research. And finally, we have the iBRICS initiative, which is trying to have more innovation, and via that innovation how we can focus more on entrepreneurship. That is where we are trying to commercialize the same. So these are all the basic and the static initiatives that we have. Now what are the various initiatives? That is why the BRICS is not yet able to catch up with the Western countries. Now we know that Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa, we also have Indonesia, we have Iran, we have Egypt, we have India here. Besides this, we know that the population of the entire world is concentrated in these countries itself. Despite that, we are having so many amount of structural weaknesses in actually conceptualizing the science and technological steps and the initiatives taken at the BRICS level. Firstly, you know, at BRICS, we have a rotational presidency. That means every year, the presidency of BRICS actually changes. Now, you know that this year is India's presidency, next year it will be somebody else. So this means that every year, when the presidency changes, the agenda also changes. India right now is trying to focus on innovation. India is trying to focus on sustainability under the BRICS framework in this year itself. In the next year, someone else will be hosting under something other agenda. So let us actually fix the presidency of the BRICS for some certain amount of years to one president itself. So there, that particular country can take more broader initiative. For example, EU has a same program under the same, the EU Horizon initiative, which is trying to promote more and more research and development in the European Union, where there are so many countries under the EU. Each of the countries, they take responsibility to actually focus on more and more amount of research development. Now, the second issue is of financing. You know, China is doing very good when we talk about research and development in their own sector. For example, when we talk about the private sector and the comparison of India with the rest of the world, in India, only 41% is the limit according to the Economic Survey 2025-26. Compare it with China, US and South Korea. They are way more ahead. And also, right now we have to understand, if our private sector is not investing in research and development, we are losing out on technology. And right now, in the recent world, technology is the new currency of the world, right? Technology is also a weapon right now. Because when we talk about AI, when we talk about critical minerals, when we talk about various new and emerging technologies such as 6G, these are all dependent on, proper amount of expertise of a country. So if India is ahead in all of this, India should not be worrying about the future. But we are not, right? And that is exactly what we have to understand. If there are some countries such as US who are very expert in this kind of technologies, so they are weaponizing this kind of supply chains, right? They are trying to control via export controls. And that is where we have to understand a very sad reality. India's expenditure in R&D is only at 0.64, right? Now when we talk about the US, China and South Korea, they are way ahead. Look at South Korea. They are spending around 5% of their GDP on research and development, right? And that is a very, very serious case that India is lagging behind. Also, the third reason is that, in BRICS, we have so many countries with so many interests. Even we have India and China who are diametrically opposite sometimes to each other on various amount of issues, right? So we have also various new members right now. For example, we are talking about Iran, Indonesia, Ethiopia. Right now we have seen how various crises is going on in Iran. So they cannot devote their proper time and energy in this summit right now, right? They cannot commit to various amount of financial obligations. Also talk about Indonesia and Ethiopia. They are permanent members. They can have divergent various interest in their own scientific capacity, right? They can have their own political priorities. Even right now we understand that Saudi Arabia is not yet a full member of the same. So there is a kind of a fragmented discussion within the BRICS. All the BRICS members, they must be coming together instead of having different interests, right? Also, as of the recent research proposal in December 2025, only Egypt and Iran showed interest. The rest of the members did not. So that means there is a lack of clear consensus in the BRICS itself. Also, maybe that lack of interest is stemming from a commercialization gap. That Technological Transfer Council that we have just looked at, right? Their amount of success in scaling up the AI technologies, in scaling up the various amount of technologies within the BRICS countries, right? It has not been very successful. And at the end of the day, right, we do not have a kind of a monitoring of the various amount of achievements when we talk about the science and technological and innovation programs, correct? And that is where, for example, if we talk about the ocean research or the polar research or the deep sea mining, that we all should be collaborating in this Indian Ocean region, Pacific and Atlantic region, that is not being properly developed. And that is where the main way forward is in the hands of India, because India is hosting this 2026 BRICS summit. So that is why India should be right now pushing for a permanent STI secretariat. For the majority of the various roles and responsibility of the BRICS, for example, say the New Development Bank or various other initiatives related to, say, economic spending and other initiatives, we have a permanent secretariat where there are particular offices dedicated for those responsibilities. But for science and technology initiative, we do not have the same. So India can actually try to set the main secretariat of a STI, most possibly in India itself, right? So that we have more presence of various multilateral institutions and their offices within India. And this will be countering China's dominance. Also, let us come with a global governance on AI framework within the BRICS itself, so that India can actually take leadership, and also India can take advantage of our own India's domestic AI mission, which also we'll be looking at into the next few articles. And at the end of the day, let us talk about the new members. Let us actually talk with Saudi Arabia to become a permanent member right now. Let us talk about including more new members, if possible, even the various other countries in the Middle East and also more countries from Africa, so that we can actually share our AI expertise, technological expertise, financial expertise, right? We can actually take a very, very major leap in India's global South leadership, right? Also, biotechnology, climate finance, they can be much more made better, right? And they can be made much more in sync with India's own domestic priorities. For example, we have the Bio E3 policy. We have the various technological developments, for example, 2025-2026 Union Budget Initiative to have more and more carbon capture, utilization and storage. where we are trying to have a better amount of carbon trading market in the country. So let us focus on those amount of technology and try to partner with the various Latin American nations and African nations and even with the European nations as a part of the BRICS. Also, let us promote more and more gross research development. Let us actually, for example, if India is having a very low R&D expenditure, let us partner with some of the various other BRICS countries to bring in more investments in the country in research and development. So that is exactly where India can actually move from a technology taker to that of a technological maker, right? So we have this opportunity right now. Right now, we can have this STI framework to be more and much more evolved, like we have the EU Horizon program. We have talked about this before also. It has a very big funding budget, right? It has a permanent secretariat, right? And it is actually very, very rigorous. It has a lot of networks of researchers, academicians, private companies, and government officials, and also various experts from the rest of the world. So we can also have the same as a part of the EU. And looking at the way forward like this that we have seen right now, can actually give India much more confidence in clearing and developing the framework for the same. Now let us actually practice a mains question, then move on to the prelims pointers. So guys, this article is mainly talking about the economic impacts of the crisis which is taking place in the Middle East. We know that this has been going on for around 2-3 weeks now. So the Strait of Hormuz is closed, or it is being kind of restricted, which is impacting the number of tankers with cylinders and crude oil that is reaching India. That means our supply has been restricted. And remember guys, this is not the first time that this kind of fuel crisis is ongoing in the entire world. In 2022, a similar development took place when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine started. So what we are seeing right now guys, in this post-COVID economy, the post-COVID world is totally fragmented. On one hand, we have the Trump's tariffs and all those things. On one hand, we have this Middle East crisis, which is driving up prices in India. So this is exactly what we have to look into from India's perspective, because right now, what the major economic experts are telling that India is actually in a Goldilocks zone. Imagine this, you are studying very hard, very well for 1 year, and you crack the examination, you become an IAS officer, you get your state, you get your particular CADA, and finally maybe you also get an urban posting. Nothing better than this in the entire world, right? That is exactly what is happening to India right now. At the close of 2025, World Bank, Moody's, IMF, all of them predicted that in India, the GDP growth will be more than 6%. The same is also seen in the past few quarters. We are at 8.4%. We are right now at 7.8%. That means India's GDP growth is growing very well. Also, inflation is at very low levels, 2.75%, well within RBI's 2 to 6% range of inflation, according to monetary policy framework. This is exactly what we have to understand, that India right now is in her Goldilocks era, where everything seems to be just perfect. This is from the fairy tale of Goldilocks, right? Where she actually demanded porridge that should be not too hot, not too cold. And this is exactly what we have to understand, that we, India, are right now in this condition. But there is a villain in our story. Just like the fairy tales, the villain here is the US, right? Who has gone into the Middle East without any reason whatsoever. Even their own security advisor recently has quit, telling that Iran did not pose any imminent threat to the US. Still US, on the heels of Israel, they went to Iran. They did some military operations which are still operating right now. And in the end of the day, we are paying the price, because simply by the basics of microeconomics, demand and supply mismatch has taken place. How? Supply has gone down of essential fuel items, right? Cylinders and everything, supply has been gone down, prices have increased. If the prices have increased, right now we are buying more of the crude oil at higher prices. So, you know, internationally we use dollars. So that means if the prices are increasing internationally, we have to use more dollars right now. And in this case, we are demanding more dollars for transactions. This is making the dollars to appreciate and the rupee to depreciate. So rupee has depreciated to 92 rupees. it is falling even further. And whenever we find that we are paying more money for these imported items, mainly the fuel items, which more than 80% India depends on imports. So we are having a scenario known as imported inflation. Imported inflation means that if your petrol is expensive right now, so your transportation will become expensive. If your cylinders are expensive right now, so the chole kulche, the rajma chawal that you have, all of them will be expensive. And even right now in Delhi, most of the prices have increased by 10 rupees. If I am talking about rajma chawal, right? Also, if inflation is rising, you know who will be very angry? The RBI is there. It is just like your parents, mainly, very strict mothers who do not tolerate high amount of inflation. So if even there is a single amount of inflation which is rising beyond 6%, RBI will be taking actions to increase the interest rates. Even if this is taking place, interest rates are rising, the various businesses, the firms will not be taking more loans. The firms take loans to expand their business, to make new investments, to open new branches, to give more jobs in the country. Those will not happen, that will go down. So a simple US action has impacted India also. Also at the end of the day, our current account deficit will widen. Current account deficit means simply, the amount of imports that we do minus the amount of exports that we do, right? And right now, this is we are talking about in money terms. If we are spending more in imports, such as crude oil purchases, the price of which has increased, so we find that again, this is putting a pressure on the rupee to depreciate, correct? And at the end of the day, we also have to talk about the fiscal deficit, because as of now, according to the last budget, the government of India targeted that we have to reduce the fiscal deficit to 4.3% of our GDP. But this crisis has taken place, if you can understand right now, right? The crisis has taken place as of now. If you see, the inflation is projected to reach around 4.2%, 4.6%, 5.1% in financial year 2027, right? And this is why if the inflation is increasing, the government has to also increase the various amounts of purchases. For example, we do fertilizer subsidy in India. We give a lot of fertilizer subsidy to fertilizer companies in the country, right? And fertilizer companies, they actually demand subsidies because they are dependent on imported crude oil. And if the imported crude oil, their prices are increasing right now, they would be, and the subsidy cost, they also will be increasing. And right now, we are already having an excess demand of around 20,000 crores. And reports also tell that if the oil prices hit more than $120 per barrel, the current account deficit can increase to around 3.1% of our GDP. Economists tell that around 1 to 2% amount of current account deficit as a percent of GDP is actually quite stable. It is fine. But more than 3% is very dangerous, because then we will be spending more rupees internationally. Our national income will be going to those countries, for example, Middle Eastern countries, from where we are actually importing oil. So we will be losing a lot of income there, correct? And that is why government of India actually faces a very painful trilemma. Three options are there. For example, to avoid this kind of issues, right, mainly the fiscal deficit issue and all this price rise issue, government already has raised the fuel prices of cylinders. Now if the government goes on to raise the fuel prices at the petrol pumps, obviously we will be hurt. Right now we have some states going to elections, they will be hurt too. Also, the various losses can be absorbed by the oil marketing companies, but at the end of the day, oil marketing companies, some of them are owned by the government. So in the future, they can need the government to support them, further increasing the fiscal deficit. Also, we can try to cut the excise duty on fuel by making it much more cheaper for the common person in India, but that can lead to 32,000 crore loss per 2 rupees cut. That means The way ahead is very difficult. We have to wait for the war to conclude as soon as possible. There are so many sadist people in the country who are very excited that this conflict is going on. Do not be happy, guys. This is not the time to be happy. This conflict should be ending at the earliest. But for prelims, these are the various implications that we have to keep in mind, because I want right now all of you to apply all of these things in this 2021 PYQ and let me know the answers in the comment. Now let us move on to the next one. In the Indian Express today, we have a very important and insightful article as to how AI data centers operate. These are always in the news, guys, right? For example, if we are trying to build a proper AI ecosystem in the country, we need to have more AI data centers. What are all these things? Let us understand one by one. Firstly, AI data centers are specialized buildings, which are actually built according to the massive amount of technological devices and the needs that help run any AI systems properly. For example, if we are talking about ChatGPT, Gemini, all of these are AI systems, right? They are based on AI models which require a lot of power. They are based on mainly, the huge amount of physical infrastructure. For example, the AI data centers which houses this popular AI model, they require large amount of lands, a lot of reliable and uninterrupted electrical supply. Also, they need cooling systems. Why? Because they have something which we know as graphical processing units. These are the highly specialized chips where NVIDIA is dominating right now. Now these chips, they are super specialized to run various complex systems such as games and even AI systems, because AI simply requires a lot of data. And all the models, for example, ChatGPT, Gemini, they depend a lot of AI data training. And you can only train if you have a good amount of GPUs. And these GPUs, they require a lot of power and hence this amount of physical infrastructure. They are very different, from your traditional data centers. Traditional data centers, they do not require a lot of GPUs. They can actually run on CPUs. For example, talk about the cloud infrastructure. Talk about the servers that we have for various websites. They only require CPUs such as from Intel and various other companies. But AI centers, they require GPUs. They require a lot of data training to actually train their models. And these models, then only they can be released into the public. Right? So that is why we have to understand, whenever we train a model, we give it enormous data, the GPUs process this data, and whenever you ask a question to ChatGPT or you are actually using Gemini to create various infographics and images, you are actually using the facilities at this amount of data centers. Right? So these data centers have various stacks of GPUs on one and another, and that is why if you see, this push for AI centers in the country go way back to a very unusual Government of India enterprise, that is the Reserve Bank of India. They actually for the first time talked about more data centers in the country just because of the amount of growing need for storing financial data. And financial data must be stored secured into the country itself. Also, in 2020, the Government of India released a national data center policy in a draft format. Right? Also, in 2022, the data centers are actually right now classified as infrastructure. So when we are building a new AI data center, that is a part of the infrastructure of the country. Also, when we talk about the regulation of the data, the storage of the same, in 2023 we had the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Also, finally, in 2024, India actually announced the major India AI mission, which is around $1.2 billion worth of investment in procuring the graphical processing units that would go into the AI systems here. And finally, in 2025, we had the Shanti Bill, which encourages private sector participation in the nuclear program. And one of the main need for having more nuclear reactors is to ensure uninterrupted electrical supply to these data centers, because nuclear energy is actually quite reliant when we talk about uninterrupted energy. And at the end of the day, in 2026, in the union budget, we had so many features of promoting more and more amount of AI data centers in the country. Now, when we talk about the global race here, India is way behind with only 152 data centers. As of our 2025 report, India produces around 20% of the world's data, but only around 3% of the global data center capability internationally. So you understand there is a mismatch. That means we are actually dependent more on the data centers based in China, based in US, because they are the leaders. And why we are dependent? Because we are not the first mover. When we talk about the AI systems here, they are actually quite behind the AI systems of US and China. Also, when we talk about the cost of AI data centers, they are massive. We require a lot of water, we require a lot of land, we require a lot of electricity, we require a lot of legal fees. All of these things are actually too much for the country right now, and that is why the government is giving support here. Also, when we talk about the AI ecosystem, it is actually requiring a lot of subsidiary investments too. For example, we have to buy GPUs, we have to talk about nuclear power, we have to talk about proper amount of road infrastructure, we have to talk about the connectivity with the entire world, we have to talk about proper amount of, say, submarine cables too, because the submarine cables which are laid internationally as a form of optical fiber, they actually enable the transmission of internet at high speed. And that is why, if you understand, Mumbai and Chennai, they are the dominant cities which run AI data centers in the country, because they are connected to the submarine cable routes. But this does not mean that the rest of the India is not actually talking about the same. If you talk about this article here, this project is actually ongoing in Greater Noida. Similarly, if you understand, we have so many other plans, right? For example, Google and Adani cooperation, Microsoft, TCS, Amazon, right? And so many other companies are actually talking about more projects. But there are some concerns which we have to talk about. For example, 1 megawatt data center of AI requires 25.5 million liters of water per year. So we need to ensure this too. Also, these centers generate huge amount of heat, so we have to be more reliant on the cooling systems. Also, when we talk about the AI centers, they require a lot of skilled manpower, which is we lack in our country. And at the end of the day, these lands are creating a lot of legal disputes, because sometimes these lands which are taken for creating more AI data centers, proper compensation is not paid in most of the times. This is leading to more and more legal issues. And this is why the government of India actually has come up with so many incentives. Firstly, we have the India AI mission. As of 2026, we are purchasing more 20,000 GPUs. And it is a very well-known figure right now that researchers who would want to use the benefit of this India AI mission would only need to pay around 65 rupees per hour. That means right now the India AI mission, which we are talking about including more startups by actually giving them more GPUs at an affordable price, they can lend their services at this cheaper rate. In the latest budget, the union government also announced that AI data centers which would be set up in the country, under some conditions they would not pay any tax till India becomes a developed country in 2047. Also, the government is spending more on liquid cooling systems. Then we are talking about setting up green data centers by partnering with nuclear power plants, solar power plants. We have also come up with the data protection rules of 2025, so that the majority of the data that is being trained can remain in India, and only under strict compliances and standards those data can be sent internationally, because data is a very sensitive thing, guys. We should not be letting data going out of India without any rules and regulations, for which we have the same, and for which we also have a India Data Management Office. Also, at the end of the day, we are having this India dataset platform, where most of the public and some of the private data can be used by the AI Indian startups. Because the AI Indian startups do not have huge amount of funds to purchase new data, so the government of India has made a uniform platform for the same. So these were the various things that we have to talk about this article. Now we can move on to the next one. The 14th Ministerial Conference to the World Trade Organization is slated to be held at Cameroon. And there is one very important issue which will be actually be discussed and debated at this particular conference, which is the issue of e-transmissions. Imagine one thing, guys. For example, say whenever we buy some e-books, whenever we buy some amount of digital services from some platforms such as Google and Apple, right? Very few minimal charges are actually paid to the government of India in the form of taxes or fees, right? Because there was a major agreement at the WTO in 1998 that most of these e-transmissions, which are actually part of digital intermediary platforms such as Amazon, transaction fees, or digital goods such as e-books, software, video games, and various productivized services such as various cloud infrastructure and various other services such as email, these won't be attracting a lot of fees and charges, and mostly they will be kind of zero rated also. So these are these amount of digital deliveries that cross international borders without paying significant amount of fees and fines, or say charges or taxes, right? And that is where right now, when AI generated content and AI content is kind of becoming very popular, and most of the big tech companies such as Google, Amazon, etc., they're profiting from this AI race right now, which is exploded to around $5 trillion. They are actually escaping paying a lot of charges and taxes to some developing countries such as India. And that is exactly why India is not happy with this moratorium anymore. India is telling that every 2 years you are extending this moratorium from 1998. You have to stop it right now, right? And that is why India's main stance, why India is opposing not extending this moratorium anymore, is that firstly, this tax-free status is hurting developing economies such as India. US and China, they are very happy. They are telling that, okay, these are our own companies. For example, if you see here, US, Europe, China, they are very happy because most of Apple, Netflix, Alibaba, they are all not paying significant amount of charges to the Indian government. So we are facing $1 billion of losses in tax revenues, where these big tech companies are dominating these entire digital services, due to which our own small scale companies such as MSMEs and startups, they cannot enter the space. We have to protect them. And that is why India is totally opposing the same. India is saying that there are alternate ways also. For example, you can have a limit up to which, a company can avoid paying some charges. After that limit, that company must be paying the taxes to the government. Or there can be strict amount of monitoring on a global level. But this is not happening. And exactly we have to understand, at WTO, we are facing this kind of issues for many years. There are so many allegations on India on public stock holding, right? For example, we give MSP to our farmers, we give support to our farmers in cases of so many subsidies. The WTO and mainly countries such as US, they are not happy with it. But still, India managed to have a peace clause. That means we can actually spend more than 10% of the overall value of agricultural production on subsidies, right? Also, recently we had a fisheries subsidies, and in one of the fisheries subsidies clauses, there is one overfishing and over capacity clause, where India is not agreeing to the same, because India believes that some countries from the developed arena such as Europe and US, they are forcing India to not overfish according to their own terms. So India is telling, give us 25-year transition period, because our own long coastline in India is actually filled with fishing communities. We cannot ban fishing in this way, right? Also, countries such as China, they are talking about a new investment facility for development, where Chinese companies, they are actually forcing the Chinese government to sign individual agreements with WTO members. India is telling WTO is a consensus based organization. All of the members must be agreeing to some agreement, not a few. Only if all are agreeing, then only such funds and such developments which very questionable investment criteria and standards can be going forward. Also, China is dominating in batteries and EVs, all of you know that. And that is why, China has complained to the WTO that India's production linked incentive is against WTO, because WTO promotes free and fair trade. China is telling that under PLI, the government of India is giving so many benefits, which is reducing the cost of production for the EVs and the batteries. But China, on the other hand, itself also gives so many amount of, say, incentives. Also, the dispute settlement at the WTO is not functioning at all, due to which India's own disputes are not being able to see the day of the light. because it is totally paralyzed by the US, because US is one of the main authorities who can appoint the various judges at the appellate board. And at the end of the day, Indian government also faces so many allegations that in India, some of the smartphones and the mobiles are facing a 20% tariffs by some international companies, right? And this is totally against the information technology agreement. But these are all the things that India has to navigate at this present summit right now. Now we have 2 questions from prelims. After answering me in the comments below, we will moving on to the next one. Now in this article, we are going to look at India's recent initiative regarding carbon capture, storage and utilization. Firstly, let us understand the terms itself. You know guys, right now due to global warming, there are lots of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, which is in turn leading to more and more global warming. So that is why we can have better technologies to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere directly, such as large power plants and factories. We can try to have better amount of technology fitted to the chimneys itself. So it will be capturing the excess CO2. After capturing, what we will do? We would try to compress the carbon and transport it somewhere else, because carbon dioxide is a gas. Just capturing it will not be leading to less amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We have to capture and try to process it in some kind of vessels and technologies, and we should be able to transport it. Now, where we will transport it? We can actually try to transport the carbon into some industries which would require the carbon, right? We can actually use the carbon to make more new chemicals, some new building materials such as concrete, and at the end of the day, we can try to store it underground in some depleted oil reserves or in various saline formations, where if you see, the carbon dioxide can be stored in the form of liquid or gaseous in various amounts of medium. So this is what exactly we mean by carbon capture, utilization and storage technologies, which are mainly used in industries, big industries. Contrary to it, we have something which we know as carbon farming. Now again, the problem of excess CO2 in the atmosphere can be solved using carbon farming. How? Guys, the most simplest things in the entire world are plants. What they do? They do photosynthesis by taking in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So if we try to do more afforestation, we can actually lead more carbon dioxide getting trapped in the soil in the form of soil organic matter. So in 2018, there was a kind of a question known as carbon fertilization. The main answer to this was statement number A, because in recent times we are seeing in some areas of the world increased plant growth due to increased amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because the main task of the plants is to take in carbon dioxide into the soil, and if more and more soil organic matter is present in the soil, it can lead to the growth of more plants. So it can lead to more plants and more photosynthesis, more carbon dioxide sucked from the atmosphere. So right now what we are trying to do is having better amount of cropping techniques, such as cover crops and crop rotations, such as conservation or no tillage, where we are not disturbing a lot of the soil by not having a lot of soil tillage, by not plowing the soil too much, by not disturbing the soil too much, so that the microorganism, the soil carbon, the matter within the soil, they remain intact. And that is exactly what we call as a natural solution. But right now, when we talk about India's initiative to reduce this carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, the government of India have actually gone ahead with carbon capture, utilization and storage, which is very different from carbon farming, because carbon farming is totally agriculture in nature, right? It's totally where we talk about agroforestry, we are talking about not disturbing the soil, minimum tillage, right? But when we talk about the carbon capture, utilization and storage, we are talking about power industry, steel industry, cement, refineries and chemicals, right? Where we are actually talking about those industries which are actually facing high amount of wastages of carbon dioxide emissions, right? So these are known as hard to abate industries. That means these are the industries where naturally the carbon dioxide emissions are too high because they are too polluting in nature. correct? And that is exactly why some of the experts are confused whether this 2026 20,000 crore union budget initiative is for industrial purposes or for agricultural purposes. But actually, when we look into the main details of this initiative, we understand that it is purely an industrial process here. We are talking about, the carbon dioxide emissions and the reduction of the same only in the industries. Now in India, we have various other incentives for industrial decarbonization and agricultural and soil carbon too. For example, in the West, in the European countries, mainly we talk about the storage of carbon dioxide. But in India, we are trying to utilize it. For example, under this particular mission in this present union budget, we are talking about spending 20,000 crore in research and development for more CCUS storage technologies. On the other hand, we also are trying to produce more amount of green urea, green methanol, and even green concrete. So we are trying to utilize it rather than store it. There are other incentives also. For example, say when we talk about agriculture and soil carbon, that is the carbon farming incentives, we have a carbon credit trading incentive where excess amount of industries which more carbon dioxide credits, they can sell to more polluting industries. And farming and agriculture is one of the particular, say, benefit of the same. Next, we have voluntary carbon market framework where FPOs, startups, cooperatives can actually partner with various farmers who do direct seeded rice, who do no-till farming and agroforestry. We also have the green credit program where 8 types of activities are kind of involved here, and each of the activities are verified by some agencies and reports are submitted, and then only green credits can be given to the farmers and farmers can sell those credits in the market. So this was all for this one. Now we're moving on to the last one. The insurance regulator in the country has come up with a public insurance registry. Now this registry will be talking about consolidating various data of the insurance companies and the various customers of the insurance products in the country. So it will be covering the issuance of the insurance claim, any kinds of complaints that we have, and also the dispute resolution. So everything will be taken care of as a part of this public insurance registry. So it will be reducing the amount of information, say disadvantage for some groups of the population who are sometimes not aware of the various insurance products. It will be also improving the fraud detection of some insurance companies so that we can actually look at the frauds properly. Also, data can be generated. And here in this particular portal, it will be linked with the Bima Sugam portal also. Bima Sugam portal is almost like a UPI ecosystem of the insurance sector. It is a one-stop portal where all the customers, all the insurance companies will be present for the various insurance policies in the country. Now, apart from this, the IRDAI in 2024-25 also have come up with so many insurance regulations and reforms. Firstly, right now we have 100% cash claim settlement, right? For example, any request must be accepted within 1 hour and file discharge authorization within 3 hours. Cashless services are even right now available at non-network hospitals. For it, you have to generally inform it 48 hours prior to those hospitals and 24 hours in cases of emergencies. Also, some restrictions for age limits, pre-existing diseases, and various amounts of monitoring period has been reduced. Ayush treatment also has been increased here. Right now, we have the Bima Trinity. For example, we have the Bima Sugam, which is a kind of a digital marketplace. We also have the Bima Vahak for various amounts of integration with the vulnerable sections of the population, and the Bima Vistar. Mainly, we are trying to provide life, health, accidental cover through a single policy. And at the end of the day, all of the insurance companies should be giving easy cancellation period of around 7 days. So these were all the articles that we had to discuss today. I thank you all for your patience, and please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.